Leadership is getting other people to want to and to take action to become better versions of themselves. I was wrong for complacently agreeing to something that I was not passionate about. They may have to take a job they don't love just to pay the bills. In a crisis or in a high stakes environment, people don't rise up to a higher plane. They fall back on the standards that were enforced and that they were trained on.
Kirk, welcome to the Point of Impact. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate you having me on. Should I call you Aaron or Staff Sergeant?
Well, I'll tell you what, we had a little get to know you call before, and really enjoyed that. I'm glad we're able to record now, so I can talk to you about leadership, transition, and maybe change of perspective. And you've worn the uniform of a Marine, a police officer, and you kind of lived a couple different lives. So, what do you think was the hardest transition for you?
I think the hardest transition actually was moving from a life of uniformed service to the civilian world. I retired from the Fort Worth Police Department in March of this year, so just literally a few months ago. And in the roll up to that, I found that gave me a little bit of anxiety that here I'm going from a structured environment. And, I had the Marine Corps, and then after that, jumped straight into literally, I left the Marine Corps on a Sunday, and on Monday went to the police department. So I went from the military to a paramilitary organization, structure, discipline, rank, and all of that. Then moving after 34 years of that into now you're a civilian. And that's a bit of a transition.
It is. I don't know what was scarier, if it was the deployments or the day that I wasn't really needed
Yes,
anymore. And it was when you didn't have your mission dictated to you. It was
absolutely.
up to you.
Yep.
What do you how did you go about defining that?
Well, I saw that coming earlier when I was it was 2013. I was working on getting my master's in criminal justice, and I tell people that was low hanging fruit. The department had sent me through a course called the Administrative Officers Course at Southern Police Institute in Louisville, Kentucky. And that was a semester of master's work. So I came home, I had 6 more classes to do, and I had a master's in criminal justice. That was easy. That was the, again, low-hanging fruit. But what are you going to do with that degree? Be a cop? Well, guess what? I was already a cop for a lot of years at that point. But right after that, I jumped into an MBA program. I went through the executive MBA program at TCU, Texas Christian University. That was for the after. What am I going to do when I leave the department? So even as far back as 11, 12 years ago, I was already contemplating what am I going to do when I stop putting on the uniform. Now, fast forward about a year and a half ago, I hired an executive coach because I knew when I leave the department, I still wanted to continue working. I didn't know what it would be, but I wanted to continue being active and doing something, not just sitting around catching a retirement check. There'll be time for that later. So that coach walked me through several exercises, and we ended up landing on me doing security consulting. Sounded fine at the time. So I got the certificates, did a lot of studying, went to the seminars and the convention and all this stuff. And I got 9 months down the road, had my LLC, and I'm still on the job. I'm building up my business. And then I realized yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This is not for me. I am not interested and don't get me wrong, uh, God bless those people that do security consulting and work in those fields. It just wasn't for me. It's people say, "Oh, it's so similar to law enforcement." It's really not. It's a totally different entity. So, a couple friends of mine and I were meeting, and they said, "How's this business thing going?" I told them I don't like it. I don't want to do it. And they said, "Well, dude, you're like a month away from retiring. What do you want to do?" And I said, I want a keynote. I want to do keynote speaking. I enjoy speaking in front of crowds and I enjoy teaching people. They said, what do you want a keynote on? I said, leadership. I've got 34 years with the police department. I've got the Marine Corps prior to that. I've taken so many leadership classes. I can recite this stuff backwards and forwards. And I've noticed over the last several years in working with the community that a lot of the community does not get those leadership lessons that first responders in the military get. So here's an opportunity to impart all this stuff that I've learned on a population that is sorely in need of those leadership skills.
How did you recognize the difference between not the business you were starting not fitting your interests and just the honeymoon phase being over where you have to push through and just grind? There's certainly that there's still sometimes there's a passion, but when the rubber meets the road, the reality hits you in the
Sure.
face. So how did you recognize the difference between that?
Because even going into it, I wasn't excited about it. My take was, yeah, I guess if you say it'll be good, sure. And then, I had everyone saying, oh, this is great. It makes so much sense. You're a police captain. You're moving into security. I mean, that goes hand in hand. And even from the beginning, I'm like, well, if you say so, okay. But, and I'll tell you, I was wrong for saying that. I was wrong for complacently agreeing to something that I was not passionate about. And especially in that it's not a life or death situation in that, okay, I'm retiring. That means I got a pension. It's not like we're going to starve and be kicked out of the house if I don't go do something.
Hmm.
So it wasn't out of necessity in the sense of I have to have the financials. It was at this transition, it was I want to do something that I love that I can give to the community, but I also want to make some money at it. And I think most people can get themselves in a position at some point. Your younger guys, they may have to take a job they don't love just to pay the bills. And even some of the older guys who don't have pensions or 401ks or whatever other mean income coming in, they may have to take a job that they don't like just to make the ends meet. But there's a lot more to life than having that job, and there's a lot more in the day than working that job. And outside of work, it is quite possible to figure out what do I want to do and get and position yourself through the education, the training, or whatever have you to get to that position where you are working in a field and in a job that does excite you, that you can get passionate behind.
I think that's the intersection, of the dichotomy. There, the three things are what am I interested in, what am I good at, and what will people pay me for? And if
Right.
you can find or create that intersection there, that Venn diagram where all three circles intersect, that's $1 million question right there.
Absolutely.
When you were in the police force, and you mentioned a lack of leadership training, education in the community. How did you recognize that? Where did you see this as an example?
So the first real in my face where I saw it, I was a lieutenant on the police department. I was I was working on my MBA. I had taken a position in the department. I was the special assignments lieutenant. It's a fancy name for uh, I'm the captain's hey boy. Whatever he needs done, whatever special assignment he has, he assigns to me. I go handle it. Well, the captain I worked for, I was working in an inner city area, and that captain did not like attending community meetings. So he sent me in his place. And I went to these community meetings, and I started hearing the same refrain about, why can't we have good stuff? Why is the last full service supermarket leaving our community? Why can't we have an Applebee's down the street? And that's a good question. Applebee's isn't near and dear to my heart. It's a decent restaurant, but the bigger question is why can't we have those type of establishments? And so I started looking at this and breaking it down, and ultimately it's, well, that area does not produce an income that supports those establishments. And they don't have that income because the folks there don't have the jobs that pay that money. And they don't have the jobs because they don't have the education to get those jobs. And you walk this thing back, and ultimately the end place is where it breaks down is crisis in the home and crisis in the individual. And it turns out in my community, there's over 7,500 at the time. The number's since doubled, but there were over 7,500 nonprofits operating in my county. If you got a problem, there's someone that can fix it. But the problem with that system is you have to self-identify. I have a problem. You got to find out who services it and get in front of them. Well, if your family's got 5 or 7 problems, there's a whole lot of steps to get all those resolved. So I came up with an idea of what if we created a task force, if you will, partner the police department with social services, education, and employment services, and let's take all of this to one apartment complex. Let's survey all the residents and let's identify all their needs, and every family gets a tailored prescription of services brought to bear on their family all at one time, with the intention of, can we stabilize that family? And when we stabilize them, can we get the adults living wage jobs? And then when we do, let's measure, what does that do to crime? What does that do to elementary school test scores? What does that do to median income and economic development and all that stuff? So I posted this. I ran it by my boss. He said, run with it. I networked heavily with the nonprofit community, and I realized these people were hungry. They were like, that's a great idea. The idea of collaborating with the police department. And in that, I saw they were also hungry for the leadership that the police department and that I'd learned in the leadership in the police department in leadership positions. They're hungry for that leadership in their organizations, being brought together and focused on one mission that everyone can get behind. That's where I first saw it.
And what became of that? Did the community get an Applebee's?
Uh, they didn't get an Applebee's there, but because of that program, a local city councilman got on board and moved that project, actually created a nonprofit serving that community in the heart of that community. They got a community center that they run it out of, that people in that community can go to a one-stop shop to get access to all, whether it's mental health or physical health or addiction services or job services, or all that stuff is in a one-stop shop right in the heart of that community, serviced through a nonprofit that evolved out of the work that basically an idea that I developed. So that was fun.
Tell me
So,
about tell me about Zero Gray. That's a great name, by the way.
okay, thank you.
Is that What I hear there are about 50 shades.
Something like that. I've read a book
So,
about that.
so
So,
like a zero is a very light shade. I don't know. I don't know.
so the idea of zero gray is something I've seen organizations that are healthy and move it forward and are on mission. They've removed a lot of the ambiguity inside their organization. They have clearly defined standards. Okay, they have um, they're enforcing their standards equally. They have leaders operating at their own level, and authority and responsibility going hand in hand, delegated down to the appropriate level. So, for example, if you've got an organization that inside you've got your sales guy. This guy is a heavy hitter, and he's bringing it in. This guy's crushing it, $1 million deals, and he is really contributing to the bottom line. But that guy, he gets drunk at a convention and chews out one of your vendors. If Judy in accounting did the same thing, she'd be fired on the spot. Why are we not firing this guy? And if you're thinking, well, but he produces so much for our company. The problem with differing standards for different people is everyone else on the team sees that this guy, he's getting special treatment. And you erode the trust, you erode that cohesion inside your team. So the idea is get rid of disparate treatment. Clearly defined standards enforced across the board. Everyone knows the mission. Uh, another example, if I'm gonna put it in the military terms or in police department terms. I'm a captain. I had lieutenants. I had sergeants and officers underneath me. If a sergeant needs to make a decision on something and he has to get it cleared through the lieutenant and get it cleared through me, if everything has to be cleared through me, then why do I need those other people underneath me? I'm a bottleneck at that point. So my idea is, and this is just basic leadership, the stuff that we saw in the military. You put authority at the appropriate level where this person has authority to make decisions and complete the actions in accordance with what level that they're operating at.
There was I think it was about a decade ago or so, an Australian general put out his nationwide address on YouTube for some issues that were going on in the army, and the one thing that stuck with me, I don't know, I watched that, I didn't know what he said, except I don't remember anything else that he said except for the standard you walk past is the standard you accept,
Yes,
and that
absolutely.
stuck with me forever.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I just threw a short threw a video short up that was very similar about that. That if you're not enforcing the standards, then you're accepting whatever they're doing.
What do you think is the difference between standards and preferences?
Well, that's the thing. It's like what are standards and preferences? Preferences preferences can be whatever you want them to be. Okay. Like, and they blow in the wind. It's like, well, I prefer my people don't do this. Okay. Well, if the GO, the general order, or if the corporate policy says, hey, you need to come back from lunch on time. Well, if you're like, well, I prefer them to, but I'm not willing to enforce the standard. I guess a preference, if you're not enforcing a standard, it becomes a preference.
Why are these standards so important though? And why do they
Because,
make a leader's job easier?
well, there's several reasons. And the most important of those reasons is in a crisis or in a high stakes environment, People don't rise up to, in general, people don't rise up to a higher plane. They fall back on the standards that were enforced and that they were trained on. Okay. In the military, as you're very well, you get in a situation, you kind of go on autopilot. Okay. I've been in a gunfight before. You go on autopilot. And what happens? You kind of step outside yourself and your body is just, I'm doing what the training told me to do. Well, it's the same thing with the standards. If you enforce the standards, when things end up in a bind, people fall back on those standards that they have lived under. If you don't have the standards, though, what is there to fall back? If you're not enforcing the standards, then your people will fall into chaos.
And what was it? Eisenhower? The said leadership was getting others to do what you want them to do because they want to do it.
Correct.
Uh,
And I've used that one a lot,
yeah,
but I have
and
another one that I like better. And I've quoted that quote a lot of times. But the quote that I prefer is leadership is getting other people to want to and to take action to become better versions of themselves.
I'll accept that. But how? How does a leader develop that? How do you? I know that people will work harder for a mission than a
Mhm.
paycheck. So, how does a
Absolutely.
leader influence the team, and how do they lead themselves?
So when I was in Desert Storm, and I've told this story 100 times already. I was offloading stuff at this port. uh, Cargo was coming in. We're getting everything off we're getting the tanks and the trucks and there all this stuff, all our gear off of these big cargo ships. We're at this port. We're on cold rations. Two MREs and a sandwich truck with mystery meat, mystery cheese on pita shows up once a day.
Mm,
And so anyway, we got a couple weeks of this, and I'm on this ship, and I go into the main structure to make a head call, and I see this beautiful galley kitchen. There's a couple people drinking coffee in it, and one of them was a captain of the ship, and I got to meet this guy, and I said, "How many people will this serve?" "Oh, it'll serve 120 a day, whatever, blah blah blah." I said, "Well, how hard would it be for us to get hot chow once a day?" And he says, "Oh, as long as we're in port, we'll do it." So I set up a hot chow run, okay, and I was a sergeant. I was an E5. I didn't
mhm.
ask permission. And I was the number two of the laborers on this team. And so the laborers, the truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, we all ended up because I had made this outreach. Okay, well, happens with the next ship too. I liaison with them, etc. And then after about a week and a half of this gunny who I'd never seen before comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you driver?" "Yes, I am, Gunny. What's up?" "Come with me. Captain Black wants to see you." "Well, who's he?" "Well, he happens to be in charge of the port operation." So we go see this guy, and he says, "I hear you authorized these. Or, did you authorize these guys to eat on the ships?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Well, who told you you could do that?" I said, "Nobody told me I could do that." "Well, then explain yourself, Marine." I said, "Okay. Guys are eating cold chow for 2 weeks. I saw an opportunity to get us hot chow. All they got to do is sign a shit. The government will get billed later. Everything's cool, sir." And he says, "Why'd you do this?" I said, Because my people needed hot chow. And by the way, their morale is through the roof now, and their performance is showing." He says, walk with me." So we walk down the port, and he says to me, he says, "Let me leave you with 3 words." He says, "First of all, great initiative, and I appreciate you taking care of our Marines." He said, "I'm going to leave you with 3 words: mission, men, me. In that order. You take care of your mission. You take care of your people. make sure they've got the things they need to do the job, and you take care of yourself. And he says, you've accomplished all three. And I'll tell you, you do that, mission, men, me, in that order, you will go far in this Marine Corps and in life. I've taken that lesson to heart. So how do you motivate your people? Mission, men, me. You got to define the mission for them. You got to tell them why we're doing this. Why is it important that we do this? Even in a corporate world, why is it important that we make these electronic components, or we, build these garbage disposals, or whatever they're doing? Why is that important? Where's the impact in that? Then you got to know who you got to know who your people are too. You got to know them, and you got to take care of yourself.
Of course. And that's one thing I've noticed about the Marines, as in the Army, not so much in the Navy, but I was previously a sailor before jumping ship, going to the Army. But,
Right.
And I was a Navy cook. But
Okay.
so what I did notice, and especially the combat arms branches, is that the leaders hold back. The troops get the chow first. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, a guy named Simon Sinek, he's a leadership guru, wrote a book on that called Leaders Eat Last.
mhm.
And he discussed specifically in the Marine Corps how the leaders eat last.
Well, that's the mission, people, self. It's actually
Exactly.
not just the three most important things. It's in order of precedence.
Correct.
Self comes after mission and your people.
Right.
So the only difference with the Navy is that leaders eat separately. And leaders
Well, there's
get
that. Yeah,
get to
they have their
go.
own messes and senior chiefs and all that. Yeah.
Oh, man, they got to eat good. I was actually the admiral chef,
Okay.
and leaders get to go on liberty first.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah. What else? What other lessons on leadership did you learn from the Marines? From your service in the police?
I'll tell you a couple of them. You talked about, how do you motivate someone to be a better version of themselves? Well, how do you do that? Well, it's real simple. And I'll give you a story. So I took over as the commander of the traffic division, which was pretty cool. I got to ride a motorcycle. They trained me on that. That was fun. But anyway, so I'm there a couple months, and I'm walking around. That leadership by, management by walk around. Go see who's doing what. And I see this detective, and he's sitting at his desk. I said, "What are you working on?" He says, "Well, to be honest, sir, I finished my work for the day about 30 minutes ago, and I'm working on finishing up my bachelor's degree. I'm on my last class." I said, "That's awesome, man. Good job, Josh." He says, "Thanks." He said, "To be honest, sir, you're the one who motivated me to do this." I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "I don't know if you recall, but 5 years ago, when I started on this police department, I was a rookie officer, just finished training, working for you on midnights." I said, "I remember that." And he said, "I don't know if you remember, but after roll call one night, you pulled me out back and we talked for a few minutes." And he said, "You told me, Captain," he said, "you said, Josh, you're a really sharp guy, and I'd like to see you go far in this organization. We need guys like you in the upper ranks. But to get there, you're going to need to get your education. I'd love to see you get your bachelor's degree on the way." Now, here's the thing, Aaron. I don't remember that conversation because I'd had a similar conversation with so many different people. Not everybody, but the people I think need to rise. I tell them they need to rise, and I tell them here's the secrets to doing that. Go get the education, do this, do that. I don't remember that, but he sure did, and he took it to heart. And that's a lesson for leaders is you may have these conversations with people day in, day out, and you may not even remember it. Man, they sure do. And that being said, make sure it's a positive conversation and leave them with a positive message.
Yeah, that's the thing about leadership. It's not just a dictatorship. It's not just
Absolutely.
authoritarian. Yeah, the carrot, not just the stick.
Mhm.
And I remember, uh, I forget who told me about it, but it was just in high school, and it was like the shop teacher had pulled him aside. The kid was, kind of troublesome, wasn't doing very well, poor grades, all that. And it was the shop teacher to pull him aside, and it wasn't for any other reason except just a random act, and said that he saw something special in him. He saw character. He saw
Mhm.
a whole lot of strength and a whole lot of potential. And it wasn't, it, it wasn't one of those things. My friend told me it wasn't one of those things where he was urging him to do better. Just a compliment paid.
Right.
And when he told our other friend, years later, we stayed in contact. He's like, "Oh yeah, that guy, the shop teacher tells everybody the same line." But uh, but it
Sure.
worked. I mean, it works.
But it
And
worked because
it,
you made that guy feel
it
special.
yeah, at that moment he felt special. He felt recognized
Yes.
and encouraged to actually reach further than the his standard.
And that's what I want for people. Someone asked me just recently, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be known for? And that question kind of threw me off guard. I'm like, I ain't even thinking about a legacy. But if I had to say, because that's a kind of an egotistical, anything I say is kind of me talking about me, and okay, fine. But if I wanted to have a legacy, I think it would be I want people to say, man, this guy was always pushing me to be better at being me, to be a better version of me. I don't need people to be like me. I need them to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
Hmm. That's why would have I've heard the same exact line, uh, only with one variation. The fill in the blank. Uh, my example, my friend Eric Weinmayer is the first blind person to climb Mount Everest.
Oh
And
wow.
as he and his guide, his whole team were coming down from the mountain, his guide turns to him and says, "Eric, don't let this fill in the blank. Don't let Everest be the greatest thing you ever do."
Absolutely.
But
Go
I've
do
heard other
monkey chasing.
people, other mentors tell other people the same thing.
Right. It, I had along that same line with the education, I had a sergeant working for me, same office. It was probably a year or two later. And I asked him, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm working on my schoolwork. Okay. He says, I'm finishing up. I'll have a bachelor's degree in 2 months. I said, what are you going to do now? He says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you you've already carved this time out of your day and every week. If you don't fill it with something positive, it will get filled in. And it'll be doom scrolling the internet or watching TV or just goofing off. I said, since you've got this time carved out, uh, why don't you look at a post grad program, master's or something like that? And he says, well, I never thought about that. I said, well, there's the two most versatile degrees out there is an MBA and a law degree. I said, because every business has lawyers. And if you have an MBA, you speak the language of business. So you can be a police chief, you can be a, work in city government, you can go into private business, whatever have you. And he says, well, my wife's getting an MBA. And I said, well, I guess that means you're getting the law degree, right? And I'm prodding him. And he's like, well, I never thought about that. And I said, just give it some thought. He comes to my office 3 days later and taps on the door. He says, hey, Cap, can I talk to you? I said, sure, come on in, man. He says, given a lot of thought to what you said, I think I want to get a law degree. I said, great. Let me introduce you to this guy and this guy, some friends I know. And so I introduced him to these guys. And he graduates next spring from law school. Like he's already a couple of years into law school now, and he'll graduate next year. I didn't do the work. He did the work. All I did was plant a seed.
Nonetheless, there's still that selfish satisfaction
Mhm.
in aspiring or inspiring someone to aspire.
I get so much joy out of seeing these guys. And the thing is there have been several. It's like, hey, Cap, just letting you know, I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, you told me I should get, XYZ, get my master's degree. Well, I'm getting it this spring. Or, yeah, I'm finishing up because my bachelor's degree, because you told me to do this. It's like all I did is plant seeds. And I reap such reward as a leader from seeing these guys and gals go accomplish these things just because I put a spark in their head.
It's a fulfilling sense of self. It's extremely rewarding. It's better
Absolutely.
than for me. It's better than personal accomplishment. Is
Yes, it is for
inspiring
me
others.
too. Well, because you're amplifying. Okay. I'm in doing, in spreading this out there. It's like a force multiplier because this guy or gal, what are they going to do down the road? Hopefully, and ultimately, hopefully they'll say when they're in a leadership position, they'll say to their folks under them, hey, I see potential in you. Have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about advancing your career? Have you thought about getting a degree? Those type of things. Why? Because it got paid forward to them.
And that's that mission people self in reverse, where the better you become at leadership, the better you can develop your people,
Yes,
and the better you can lead them, and that's how you get mission success or
exactly.
accomplishment. So
Absolutely.
tell me, tell me more about your mission to erase ambiguity. And tell me,
Okay.
where does ambiguity raise its ugly head,
Well,
and how do you get rid of it in an
all right. So I
organization?
brought up one scenario where you've got your hot shot sales guy. He's throwing layups and constantly sinking them and putting points on the board, and you're allowing him to get away with behavior that you wouldn't allow others to get away with. That's a
Hmm.
problem. That creates chaos. Anything that creates conflict in your organization. It could be you may need to review your policies because if the policies are an issue, then that could create that chaos and that ambiguity or a lack of policies on stuff. Another one. I'll
He's
give
the
you
chief's
another,
nephew.
sir.
He's the chief's nephew.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly. So I'll throw another one at you. You got two employees. You got Bill and Sally. Bill and Sally have gone to, they've got the same amount of training. They got the same amount of education. They got the same amount of experience. Bill's got a wife and a couple kids at home. Sally lives by herself in an apartment. Okay. Bill's a little older than Sally, but aside from that, they came on and got hired at the same time. You, as the supervisor, you've given them the same evaluation because they're performing at the same level. But then it gets to your boss who determines raises, and Bill's a family guy. He's got a family to take care of. So I'm going to give him a 6% raise, and I'm going to give Sally a 3. Think that doesn't happen? Happens all the time. You think they're not going to talk about this? You think that's not going to get out to the team? What message are you sending?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not only are you sending a message that creates conflict in your organization, but you're also, in that instance, setting yourself up for a potential discrimination lawsuit. Okay.
Of course. There's a different, all sorts
So
of ways that can be
this
caustic.
exactly. So this is the type of ambiguity I'm talking about. Okay. Clearly, and how do we erase that? Clearly defined standards, clearly defined policy, equal and clear enforcement of those standards and of that policy. Treating your people equally if they're doing equal jobs. Now, there's the rub, because this person may not be doing a job up to the level of this person, but you better document it. Clear documentation of everything. Okay. And let me tell you about something else too. The first, people ask me, what's the most important leadership lesson? And I'll tell you, I don't know. The one that sticks, the one that you're actually going to implement, yeah, that's the important one. But let's go to the first lesson of leadership. In my opinion, the first lesson of leadership is you better get your own moral compass centered before you even think about leading anyone else. I've had quote unquote leaders in my organization that I've worked for. They're more managers than leaders, but they want to play loose with the rules. They, hey, I need you to, I know this is outside the rules, but I need you to do this and blah, blah, blah. And I've seen people fall prey to that. And I've seen people such as myself and another guy that I was working with that we refused to do that. And we had some punitive stuff put on us until it all came out. And when it all came out, those folks that followed this guy down the primrose path, if you will, he hung them out to dry. When the boss, when the audit came out and saw these people were doing some bad stuff, this bad leader was the first to say, I can't believe they did this. We never did this in my day. I have no choice but to recommend termination. This is an abomination. And everyone's looking going, but not only did you do that, you encouraged them to do the same thing. And you turned a blind eye when they did, and now you're throwing them out? That's the gray area. That's what I'm talking about. Get rid of that. And get rid of the people that are promoting that.
What do you think was one of your more difficult leadership lessons? The maybe more painful leadership lessons, because those are always the ones you learn the best from.
For me, it was always so in the police department. The way we discipline people is it could be paper discipline, a letter in their file, but more severe stuff, it's giving people days off without pay. And that was always very difficult for me because I've been on the receiving end of this and I don't take that lightly. And with that, I really have to, whenever I've been in that position, I've had to weigh, okay, I've known people and I've known chiefs who are like, I'm going to give this person X number of days off without pay because I want it to hurt. I want it to be severe enough that when they ever think about doing anything like this again, they cringe at the time they couldn't buy Christmas presents for their kid because they got 10 days without pay the first week of December. Things like that. And I have to, I never was in a position to actually give the days off without pay. I only made recommendations
Mm.
at my level. And I always weighed, you had to weigh the severity of the violation with, in my mind, what is enough of a disciplinary action to get that person's attention enough to correct that behavior. Okay. Why hit them with a 15-day suspension if a 3-day suspension will do the job? Because if you overkill them with that, you'll completely destroy the morale of that employee and all of his peers or her peers who see that you overpunish this person. That was the ones that kept me up at night, is
Mhm.
dealing with actually taking money out of people's pockets.
I think in the military, because that's one of the things commanders can do also.
Hmm.
Uh, Time, money, grade.
Right.
However, it's these service members, the soldiers, their their needs are all taken care of.
Hmm.
For the most part,
Sure.
they're living on the barracks, getting
You got chow.
getting the meal card, and uh, the money, the pay. Sometimes that's just spending money. It
Right.
really is.
Hmm.
So uh, sergeants get creative, um, but
Oh,
that's a whole nother ball of
oh yeah.
wax there.
Working parties. Been there.
But sometimes it works. Sometimes it's just hazing. But
Right. And
it's about correcting the action.
that's where that fine line is.
Hmm.
Finding that balance of what is the correct, the behavior, what is the correction for that behavior versus stepping way over and now it's just hazing.
There was a internet debate about prison systems and meal quality, and somebody said if it's supposed to be reform, then why do they have to get additional nutrition from the dismal pay and buying food at the commissary? So it's
Mhm.
not about reform; it's punishment.
Well,
It,
okay, that's a big debate in society right now.
mm, yeah,
Because I agree with you that there are consequences to actions, and if your actions are criminal, well, we lock you up and we take you away from society, and it's not supposed to be pleasant. Okay, they call them penitentiaries. Okay, the root word is penitence,
penitence.
meaning that's where the reform is, in that I don't want to be here again, and I am, penitence is I am sorry for my actions.
Mm,
I take, and implicit in that is I am taking responsibility for my actions that got me here. That is penitence, right?
mm. And so, in relation to the leadership, it's like society. We have a set of rules. We have a set
Hmm.
of standards, and if you don't abide by the standards, you break them. Then there's got to be the action for uh, correction, or
Correct.
you're taking out of that you know that framework, that society.
That
We're
is
going to take you out of this, and you know you can earn your penitence.
correct. Hmm.
Uh, uh, just we're tying it all together is that the again to the carrot and the stick. We've got reward system. We've got a um, consequence system.
Hmm.
But it's where do we where do we decide what's uh, enough? Sometimes we fail when it's not enough, and sometimes we fail when it's too much.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up because one of the things I speak on is is an idea called that I have called redemptive leadership. Okay. So once you've, as a supervisor or as our institution, once we've punished this person, it's over. It's done.
Hmm.
They need to be fired. Fine, fire them. Get them out of there. But if you're going to keep this employee, don't lay it on them. Don't continue to lay it on them. I'll give you an
Hmm.
example. I had this guy years ago. I was a sergeant, and this guy, he wasn't under my supervision at the time, but he'd gone down to the river and had too much to drink, and he ends up in a fight with a bus driver and gets arrested, and the bus driver is the one who started it, so the assault charge dropped, but he did get a public intox. Okay, fine. And so the police department decided to keep him, but they gave this guy like a 30-day suspension, which is that's pretty severe suspension. 30 days.
Hmm.
30 days with no appeal, or indefinite, meaning that's tantamount to firing, and you can appeal and maybe you'll win, probably you won't. That's the civil service system for you. So he takes a 30-day suspension. He comes back to work, and the supervisor that he was working for, when he gets back to work, it's, oh, hey, you were a couple minutes late to roll call today. Well, yes, sir, I called ahead and I told you I'm stuck in traffic. There was a wreck on the freeway. Well, yeah, I need you to sign this. This is documentation going in your file. And then a couple days later, hey, yeah, I see you didn't polish your shoes today. Here, have some paper. And it was this constant wallpapering this guy with paper discipline that supervisor was not doing for anyone else.
Hmm.
But that's because that supervisor had labeled him as a bad egg and is just hammering him now.
Mm-hmm.
This guy gets reassigned to me. Captain, hey, this ain't working over here. Sends him over different district. I'm over this other district. I'm just shift supervisor, and he's on my shift. And so we have a roll call, and after roll call, I said, hey man, let's go talk out back. So we go out to the parking lot, and stand in that parking lot. I said, hey, look, I said, here's the bottom line for me. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what you did in your past. You screwed up. You got punished. Okay, that's done. You're still a police officer. If you want to improve your reputation, I'm your guy. I will do what I can to help you improve that.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the coin, if you want to continue down that path that took you to where you were, well, like Dr. Phil says, how's that working out for you? And he says, I really want to change course, and I'd like to improve my reputation. I said, great. Here's all I ask of you. You know the rules. Go out here, answer your calls, take care of your business, and in your private life, fly under the radar. Don't go out and get drunk in public. Don't drink in public anymore. Just keep your business out of the papers. And at work, take care of your business here and do your job. Now, for the next 2 or 3 months, my lieutenant's like, man, you need to watch him like a hawk. This guy's trouble. I'm like, I got him. Captain, every time I'd see him, man, that guy's trouble. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's actually, yeah, he screwed up. He admitted it. He's moved on, and he's one of my best producers. Within 3 months, that guy was my go-to guy. Whenever I had something that needed a soft hand or a special touch on, like the guy that it's like, he's your fixer. It's like, hey, I need you to make this problem go away in a proper manner. That was my guy.
Like,
Six
like,
months after that, he ends up in a specialized unit, was doing phenomenal work. And this was as an officer. That guy turned the corner, rose up through the ranks, and before I left, I was in charge of narcotics vice gang and those high-speed units. That guy promoted to lieutenant, and I was able to recruit him over to one of my teams. And he was one, and then the guy's a phenomenal leader inside our department. Why?
who's that
Because
guy? What was
because
like Michael Chiklis on in The Shield? He was your fixer.
Mhm.
Yeah. You,
Well,
you
not
was
like that,
you told me.
not the bad way, not the, like scare people, but it's like, I'll give you an example. This is a crazy story. This is a little bit off topic, but we had this burglar alarm that was going off, and it was like it had been connected to a bigger system, one of the alarm companies, but they stopped paying their bills, but the audible was going off. Apparently the people are out of town. And so it's going off all day, like 12 hours. People are calling in, raising Cain about it. Hey, the neighbor's alarm's going off. So we come in the evening. Dispatcher calls me, hey, this alarm call's been going, for the last 10, 12 hours, and they're calling in like every 30 minutes. Can we cancel it? I said, no, hold the call for a few. And they said, okay. So I call this guy up. I said, hey, you busy? He says, I'm just finishing up a call. I said, you got any tools? I said, in my truck. I said, come by the office and take a call here. So he comes to the office. I said, dude, this call's been holding. I mean, it's been going all day long. Go out there and make that alarm stop. If you've got to, you got to, climb on the roof and cut the wires to the speaker, whatever you got to do. If you damage anything, leave them a note and leave them a business card. He said, okay.
Mhm.
So 25 minutes later, he calls me. He says, hey, Sarge, problem solved. I said, okay, what'd you do? He said, actually, I broke into the house. Okay, how? And he said, well, I was able to, he says, it turns out the neighbor has the same alarm system. So he knew exactly where the alarm was and how to disable it.
Mhm.
So I popped the back sliding door off track and I got into the house and unplugged it, and no more alarm issue. I left them a note on their counter. I secured the patio door, and it's got one of them little wing nut things that locks it in place. He said they're not getting that off without a pair of pliers, so no one else is going to break in. He says I went out through the garage. I said okay. So this guy, again, we have an issue, and he took care of it a little bit outside of normal thinking, but we
Like
fixed.
a creative problem solver.
Exactly. Almost kind of like E4 Mafia stuff, right?
I love that example too. It's John. What was it? John Wooden. I think I'm
Okay.
terrible with names and quotes, but he said a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. So, with a little bit of coaching, a little
Sure.
bit of influence, that leadership influence, uh, and a little trust. You
That's what it's about.
you turn the whole trajectory around on somebody.
Yes. Yes. Redemptive leadership. They've already been punished. Now give them an opportunity to thrive. Motivate them.
Hmm.
Give them that spark and give them the room to show you what they can do.
And the, that lieutenant, you
Mhm.
just writing paper, you know, stacking up building the bricks
Yep.
that'll be that that person's that other officer's you know uh, building the determination, right?
Right. And
Preparing the paperwork, and everybody can see that. It's the
right.
same in the military.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, like, why do some leaders try so hard to protect their own position than develop their people?
Because they're not leaders, they're managers.
Mm.
They're not leading people. And to be honest, why do they do that? They do it out of fear. I remember
Mm.
years ago, I had a gal. Yeah, I had so it's kind of funny. Uh, I was a captain in this one area, and the commander had recruited me to come work for him. Basically, at the time, I was his XO, he was a CO. And so, long story short, there's this, they did some folks did a political hit job on him because it was an appointed position. And so this internal affairs case goes up, and I end up like named in this IA case. And and this is the stupidest thing. They're like, uh, this gal said, there's just this gal in literally, she's like, "Hey, Captain, we have burritos, breakfast burritos in the back. You want one?" I go back, "Yeah, sure." I walk back with her, and I just got to this place, like, I don't know, a month earlier. And she's like, "What do you think? You like it here?" And I said, "What's not to like? We're in the good part of town. I mean, the people love us. We got great restaurants around us. The call load's light. We got this new facility, got great equipment." And I said, if we can just keep the wheels on the bus and the drama to a minimum, this place is going to be fantastic. And she's not the only one I said that to. I said that to a bunch of people, almost verbatim. If we can keep the wheels on the bus, keep the drama to a minimum, right? So anyway, this complaint goes out on this guy, and I get named in it too. And somehow me saying keep the wheels on the bus and the drama to a minimum got interpreted. I didn't realize that this person who's asking me was a source of much drama. I didn't know it at the time. And so she made a complaint that, well, when I said that, what I was trying to tell her was, I know you cause drama, and if you cause any drama, I'm going to transfer you.
Hmm.
That's what she took out of me saying, if we can keep the wheels on the bus and the drama to a minimum, this is going to be a good place. So, okay, fine. Neither here nor there. So I end up, my boss's boss at the time, he's doing the investigation, and he says, did you make this comment? And I said, yeah. And he says, did you mean, were you trying to tell her you're going to get her transferred out? And I said, no, I didn't know. I didn't know she was the drama at the time. I do now. He says, okay, well, I'm going to put in here that I counseled you about this. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you counseling me on? I did nothing wrong. Well, sometimes you got to really watch what you say because people can interpret it wrong. I said, no, no, no. There's no misinterpreting this. That me saying keep the wheels on the bus and the drama down. There is nothing in there that indicates I'm going to transfer you. And for her to say that, that's a huge jump. Well, I'm just going to put in here that I counseled you. And I said, and counseling me, saying that you counseled me implies that I did wrong. Okay. And there's a lot of nuance in here.
Mm-hmm.
And he did do that. But here's and why did he do that? Because if anything ever comes back later, he can say, but I took action. Because
It's
he
documented.
he had too much fear in saying, I investigated this and I found no wrongdoing. He was afraid to take that stance. And I say to that is dung. That is straight up horse dung. A leader has to be able to stand up and say, I've investigated this, and if nothing was done wrong, great. Nothing was done wrong. Own it. But too many times, leadership is like, I have to do something, otherwise they'll come for me. Well, you investigated. That is something. That is the action you took. I investigated. And I, in my experience and education and everything else, found no wrongdoing. There's your action. But too many leaders are scared to say that. It's an
As we
easy
start
route.
to,
I'll paper them up.
yeah, as we start to wrap up here, I want to ask you, what are those things that is usually pretty uniform across services, just about anywhere, organizations, is that you want to uh, give your team all the praise, all the give
Yes,
them the glory for the accomplishments, and not
absolutely.
take it for yourself,
Yep.
but you want to take all of the blame as the leader. But that's easier said than done. How do you how do you inspire? How do you lead that sort of culture in an organization?
Their example. You lead it through example, and you may say it's hard. It's hard for some people, but it's real easy for me when the boss says, "Man, you're doing a good job." It's easy for me to say, "Brother, I'm just the front man for this band. They're the ones that are making the music happen. They're the ones doing the work. I'm just the guy I'm guiding them. I'm giving them, giving them the direction and the motivation to go out here and do the work." Okay. But on the converse side, it's one thing to say your person's, this particular person's screwing up. And if they're screwing up, okay, yeah, I will take care of that. I will make sure that it's taken care of. That's owning it. But if your whole unit's screwing up, well, you know what? That's on me. If my boss says my teams are screwing up, that is on me. And it always is. Even if the boss knows that, no, it's actually the sergeant over this team, me saying it's on me, give me an opportunity to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I get blamed for everything.
Yeah. So that's not a hard position, and I think that's the humble servant leadership position. That's the best. That's how I know how to lead.
Well, Kirk, I think that's a good place to transition into the final segment.
All right.
This is the countdown to impact. It's 3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person who have all made an impact in your life.
All right, 3 books. So there's, being a Marine, there's a leadership book that came out back in the 90s called Core Business, CORPS, Core Business, 30 leadership or 30 management principles of the United States Marine Corps. And I've read that book probably 5 or 6 times over the years. And it talks about a lot of the stuff that I teach: delegation, ownership, all of clarity of mission, setting the standards equally and enforcing them equally, all that stuff. Here's the thing about leadership. Leadership has been going on since man has evolved into tribes. Someone's leading them. Some are good, some are bad. So, it's kind of like the Bible, all the lessons in the Bible. Well, that's a good book on human nature, even though parts were written 5,000 years ago, because man is man. And then that's just, we live under that human condition. So Core Business is one. There's a book called Influencer. Okay. How to influence people. I forget the author on that thing. But the influencer model, great book on here's what makes people tick, and here's the barriers to getting people to act. And there's 6 categories: internal, external, and it's like in the individual, in their environment, and in the systems itself. So 6 categories you've got to get in alignment to make stuff happen. And there's another book, a social economist named Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Tipping Point. Tipping Point is, how do you make something go viral? And for me, that fascinates me. You've got an idea. How do you turn it into a movement? How do you get other people on board with you and get this thing steamrolling in a positive direction to make that impact in your community or your organization? Those 3 books have been instrumental for me. 2 quotes. One of those quotes you already said, leadership, per Eisenhower, is motivating people to voluntarily do those things that you need done. But the other quote, I'm reading all these quotes on leadership, and the other quote, there's another definition of leadership. Leadership is motivating people to want to and actually take action to become better versions of themselves. And that, to me, that's what it's about. One person, I don't even know the guy's whole name, but Captain Black, who was on that port at the port of Jabail, back in, what was it, 1990, was it 1991, who told me mission, men, me, in that order. Mission, people, self. There you go. I've lived by that for a long time. If I would love, and maybe you got a connection that I don't, or maybe someone in your audience, but if someone has a connection to find out who Captain Black was in the Marine Corps at the Port of Jabail in January of '91, I'd love to meet that guy again and give him a big thank you.
You got a unit on that? Do you know?
Nope, I don't. That's all I know about him. And the thing is, that was probably like a temporary assignment. Go shore this up. I don't even know what your real job is. I don't know the dude's first name or none of that.
We'll see.
Anyway.
You never know.
Yeah.
So those are great examples. Also, you said the second book was Influencer, not
Influencer.
Influence.
Yeah, let me look that up real quick. I'll tell you. Influencer.
Okay, I have read. What was it? Influence and Persuasion. Is that his other book by Robert Cialdini? But Influencer, I'm not familiar with.
This is called Influencer: The New Science of Leading Change by Joseph Grenny, Kerry Patterson, David Maxfield, Ron McMillan, and Al Swizzler.
I'm going to have to check that one out. Thank you. All right. Last two questions.
Yes, sir.
One, where can people find out more and get in contact?
The easiest way is go to my website, zerogray.com, ZEROGRAY.com. Don't Google Zero Gray. You're going to end up with a bunch of hair care, dye products and stuff. Run it together, zerogray.com. Or you can find me email me at Kirk, K-I-R-K, at kirkdriver.com.
Excellent. All right, we'll get those into the show notes. And last question.
Yes, sir.
What is your definition of living a life of impact?
All right. I'm going to tell you, so years ago, sitting at a discount tire waiting on some new tires, and I'm reading this Men's Health magazine, and they got some article about, I couldn't even tell you what the article is about, to be honest. But in this article, they had a quote from the NASCAR circuit. You know, NASCAR, driving cars, big ovals, go fast, real loud, all over the South, right? And the quote goes like this: if you ain't scared, you're not going fast enough. You want to live a life of impact? Get outside your comfort zone. Get scared about something that excites you, that sets your world on fire, something that scares the tar out of you. And you grab onto it and you chase it down and just get after it, because that is how you live a life of influence.
You ever gone for a run on the side of the road without looking where you're going?
No, have you?
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I guarantee you.
Oh, hey.
That's a little outside my comfort zone.
Or mountain climbing with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
Kirk, thank you very much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate
Same
you
here. All right, you're welcome. Appreciate you having me.
Take care.
You too.